calling to order the Needham Select Board meeting for January 9th. Welcome to the new year, everybody. So the first thing we have is public comment. I am not aware of any public comments for this evening, but if there is anybody in the room or online, if you would raise your hand.
I see one hand raised.
Okay.
Jane M.V. I will ask her to speak.
Public comment is always welcome. We happen, if possible, and you could let us know that you would like to make a comment, we always appreciate that.
You could ask Jane to share her video and mic. She should be able to speak now.
Jane, I understand that you're moved over. If you could turn on your mic and your video, if that's possible. Okay. And then introduce yourself.
Hang on one second.
All right, we saw you for a moment. There you go.
Trouble unmuting. Can you hear me?
I can hear you. You're all good. So if you would like to make, you've disappeared again, but if you could go back to that. There you go. Please make your comment. We can see you.
I wanted to start out with a question on the, the clean, what you're talking about tonight about the proposed Clean Air Act or whatever you're going to be working on.
Is your question about the climate plan?
Yes, the climate plan, sorry.
Okay, so we are not quite at that hearing. If you could give us a moment till we get to that hearing, I would appreciate it.
Okay. Okay.
We have a couple of other public hearings first. So this was public comment really for things that are not on the agenda this evening. So if you could wait for a moment, that would be great.
Okay, thank you.
If there is no public comment, then we would welcome Ms. Callender. If Ms. Callender is here from Eversource. We have 2 granted locations this evening.
I'm inviting her to join right now.
Great, thank you.
Good evening. Here I am. There's always a little delay, and
There you
can you
go.
hear me and see me?
How are you? Yes.
Doing well, thank you. Happy New Year to everyone.
So the first granted location looks like it's 14 Winslow Road. If you would start with that one and talk to us about it.
Certainly. So Eversource is seeking a granted location to install approximately 44 feet of conduit into Winslow Road, and that is for temporary service for the new construction of the new home at 14 Winslow Road.
Okay. And Ms. Fitzpatrick, is everything in order?
It's all set.
Okay. Are there any questions from members of the board about this particular one? Heidi.
Thank you. Ms. Callender. I just wanted to ask, it's noted here in the petition review that it is work on private property only, but then under the comments, it talks about how the plan shows proposed conduit crossing the roadway. So I just want to make sure that the map is accurate and figure out which one it is. Is it only picking up from the sidewalk or is it crossing the road?
It's crossing the road, to my knowledge, from the transformer across the street to the new home.
Okay, just because even the rest of the comment is a little bit confusing. It talks about the handhole on both sides of the street. I just want to, I'm sure that our engineers are looking at this as well, but it seems contradictory, and we just want to make sure that we know what's going on.
So I'm sorry, could you repeat the comment that you're speaking of?
Under the comments on the petition review, it talks about the conduit crossing the roadway. I'm going to kind of show you because it's a little hard to see. Down here, it talks about crossing the roadway, whereas at the top, it says that it's on private property only. And it does make mention in the comments of both handholds on either side of the roadway. So I just want to make sure that we understand where this is going.
Okay, so it's my understanding, and I don't have the petition review that you have, but it's my understanding based upon the plan, where you can see the transformer is across the street, and it shows the conduit crossing the street, going over to onto private property.
I think the sheet indicates that it's not crossing a public sidewalk or public berm. But we can ask them for maybe some
Maybe we can just get.
clarity in general on this form in the future. How about that? So that's what I think that means. And that's why
Thank
that
you.
one is circled, that it's not going through the sidewalk itself.
Well, my recollection of these handholds is that these are all underground, right?
Yeah.
So it's not like we're having to dig up the road,
Mhm.
right, at this time of year. It's crossing underneath, in fact, to the private property where it will be dealt with. That was my read of this. But if we could clarify, it wouldn't hurt. It is my understanding that this has been fully reviewed by engineering and they are comfortable with it. I would also say that this is a public hearing. And so my question would be, are there other members of the public who are interested in this matter or wish to comment?
Oh, yeah.
We can have members of the board too.
Thank you. I thought you were skipping over.
No, I'm not skipping over you. I'm not seeing any members of the public. Kevin, we'll come back to you.
Okay. This is the first time I noticed it was for temporary service. What's permanent service? When would this become permanent service?
I didn't
Dawn?
hear the full question. I heard temporary and permanent, but I didn't hear what was in
This is
between.
to
those
provide
two.
temporary service to 14 Winslow Road. My question is, when does it become permanent? Is permanent going to be different, or is it just going to extend it to permanent?
Right, I don't have that information. I just have what we're requesting for the temporary service. I'm not sure what the permanent, I can make some assumptions, but I don't have that information.
Okay.
Other questions? If there are no other questions, I would actually appreciate a vote or motion for a vote.
Madam Chair, I move that the select board approve and sign a petition from Eversource Energy to install
Approximately 44 feet of conduit in Winslow Road.
Second.
Okay. And just so people understand, the reason why I'm asking for a vote anyway is so that the work can continue and that the homeowner is not put at risk at some stage of the process, which I know is highly inconvenient for the homeowner. I'm going to trust that Ms. Fitzpatrick is going to go double check and get back to all of us and let us know the answer to our questions. But we won't hold up the process for another 2 weeks for this question. Okay? All right. Any further questions from the board? Are we ready to vote? All in favor?
Right.
Any opposed? 5-0. Thank you.
Madam Chair, strikes me that maybe having the town engineer walk through the form at some point for the board might be a useful
A
exercise.
useful thing. I think that would be great. The second grant of location, Ms. Calendar, is, as I recall, on High Rock Street.
That is correct, 503 High Rock Street. Eversource is seeking a grant of location to install approximately 10 feet of conduit, and that is to provide a new service to the home at 503 High Rock.
All right. And again, Kate, is everything in order here
Yes.
with this one? All right. Questions from the board? This is a public hearing. If there's any members of the public here or online who have a question related to this grant of location at 503 High Rock Street? And if not, then I would welcome a motion.
Madam Chair, I move the select board approve and sign a petition from Eversource Energy to install approximately 10 feet of conduit at High Rock Street.
Second.
You have the
Okay.
exact address on there? Instead of High Rock, should it be 503? Do we-
Oh, Mark is good.
So the description does say 503,
Right. Well, I will
and
amend my motion.
the grant of location
I know,
petition review says
Just making sure.
503. So
So I will amend my motion to include the number
503
503
High Rock Street.
High Rock
I
Street.
second that motion. Yeah, appreciate
Great.
that.
Good catch.
Any further discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? 5-0. Thank you.
I don't know if you
Thank
noticed that,
you.
Thank you, Joanne.
the sewer connection from July of 1940 that was attached to
Yeah.
historical artifact.
I'm sure we have something more historical than that. All right. The next item on our agenda is a public hearing on the climate action roadmap. I know we have Stephen and Nick and Gabby here, and Cecilia, are you coming up too? Are you like, being the, just support? Okay, I'm just checking on
Always good to have.
where you are in this.
Great.
All right. Thank you, team. So this is something that we've been discussing. We wanted to bring it to the public. I know that you have a brief presentation again tonight, just to give an overview for people, and then we're interested in comments from members of the public.
That's right. So I'll try to keep this brief. Some of the slides you guys have all seen before. So we were chartered just a couple of years ago to bring this roadmap to you. So we're excited to do it. So
And Stephen, if you just want to start introducing the
Yeah.
three of you, so.
so I'm Stephen Frail, the chair of the Climate Action Planning Committee. And
I'm Nick Hill. I'm the vice chair.
Gabby Queenan, Sustainability Manager.
great.
Thank you. Great to have you guys.
And this is just the overview of who was on the climate action or who is on the climate action plan committee, including Mary Ann and Kevin from the select board. So quickly, just how we got here. We had our charter in early 2022 when we first formed. We developed a work plan in those first few months, and then took our first pass at climate actions in Q4 last year. And we had a large group of volunteers who helped us with that from all sectors in town, including many of the town staff, which was very much appreciated. We put together our first greenhouse gas inventory earlier this year. We then went back and refined our goals, strategies, actions to map them to where our greenhouse gas is being emitted. And we drafted a roadmap. And that has got us to this point, the public comment. And based on the feedback we get from here and elsewhere, we'll move towards publishing a final roadmap. So just some other things we did is we solicited Needham opinions on climate change earlier this year. The respondents, we had overwhelming response. 92% said that they agree climate change is happening, and 82% think that the town of Needham, and not just the town, but all parties in Needham, should be doing more to reduce our impact on the environment. These results, while not scientific, were very consistent with a scientific poll that the Yale Opinion Survey on Climate Change put out in 2021. So at that point, 72% of adults agreed that global warming is happening. So why are we taking action? A variety of reasons: to ensure that Needham reduces its contribution to climate change. It can save money for taxpayers if we address, as we know, there's a lot of costs associated with climate change, damage from storms, for example. We want to preserve our town's history, culture, quality of life, prepare for coming impacts of climate change, which are expected to become more intense over time. And we're also acting because our constituents are asking us to do so, and then to comply with state law. So generally, the US temperature has been warming since 1970, so 2.4 degrees, and about 1.4 degrees here in Boston. So it is happening, it is here. We're seeing it in increased, more intense storms, heat waves, drought. So 2022 was our year of drought. A lot of people lost a lot of plants, lawns. 2023 was our year of flooding, and we can expect more of both. So when I mentioned we are looking at our greenhouse inventory, we identified that our greenhouse gases come primarily from the non-public sectors. So about 37% are from homes, residential buildings, apartments, 32% from private transportation. So that's people's cars, trucks, et cetera. And then 27% from commercial buildings. And there's other areas, our solid wastewater, wastewater and public transportation or other notable sources of it. But just 2.5%, under 3%, comes from the town of Needham itself. So this is a problem that needs to be addressed across all sectors. Okay, this is no longer going for, there we go. If we do nothing, we will see that we are continuing to put out roughly 80% as much of our emissions in 2050 as we are today. So the electrical grid is actually greening, and that's where basically all of the savings in this view of us doing nothing would come from. The electricity grid greening. Everything else, all our cars or our heating would continue to put greenhouse gas emissions into the atmosphere. Our roadmap, if we follow this carefully crafted roadmap, can get us to net zero by 2050. So this involves the decarbonization of all sectors. You can see gas-powered cars and trucks as they're replaced with more efficient and eventually electric vehicles. That's one example. Homes and heating as we switch over from fossil fuels to electric heat pumps. And then, of course, the homes and electricity, the electricity in homes and buildings as that greens. So we can get there. The roadmap that we're reviewing and getting public comment on tonight, it has 5 high impact strategies. So electrifying our transportation, which is where most of our, a good chunk of our greenhouse gas emissions come from. Second is electrifying buildings, pursuing building efficiency in addition to that. Eliminating gas leaks, reducing our solid waste, and then shifting to public transportation and other non-carbon focused transportation. The 6 key focus areas for the climate change are in that clean energy, governance, natural waste resources, net zero buildings, resilience, public health, and transportation. So a couple of those, governance and the resilience in public health, have more to do with how do we address the impacts of climate change? How do we hold ourselves accountable for addressing that? Less, the other 4 are much more focused on the actual greenhouse gas reductions. As you go through the plan, you'll notice that each of those focus areas has a set of actions, proposed actions. And I just want to underscore that these are all proposed actions. None of these are being adopted here tonight. It's all going to go through the public review process. But these are the actions that we believe, if collectively acted on over the next 5, 10, 15 years, we can get to greenhouse gas zero. So a few things I want to underscore for anybody who's not familiar with the roadmap. It is just a roadmap. It is just a set of recommended actions. And we're trying to prioritize them relative to impact versus cost. But it is really up to the select board. It's up to town meeting, finance committee, and the other boards in Newton to take these actions up. These are just our recommendations. And so each action as it's taken up will go through whatever the standard town decision-making process is for that. And I just wanted to call out very quickly that there's actually a lot of action that's happening already. So not in the plan are things like people are familiar with the solar array at the RTS and the lighting, LED lighting that we put over town in years prior to the committee. But we've also hired a sustainability manager. So thanks again to the town for doing so. We've adopted the opt-in specialized energy code, which will go into effect in July. And we have in process a municipal electricity aggregation, and the planning board is working on updating zoning and permitting bylaws to help promote solar. So that's the overall instruction. I'll turn it back to you, Madam Chair.
Great, thank you. I know that we did receive some comments online, a couple over vacation. I had one comment that seems to be not here, so I will raise it. And I think there were a couple in today, and I admit I've been all day in training, so I haven't read any feedback today, but feedback will be read by everybody and considered before we do our final turn to the plan and commit that to a point in history. All right, it is a living document. I expect it will modify going forward. The question that I had that I kind of went, where does it fit in here? Was a question that was asked about food and agriculture. Now, of course, agriculture isn't a huge Needham industry, although we do have some farms here. All right, but food as part of people's diet, I think at the latest climate summit that just took place, was suggested that it's almost 30% of the emissions globally. So how do we think about that in our overall plan? And is there a place where we can at least acknowledge that, was the question that was asked.
Are we answering any of these, or is this more for?
So
to-
I'm raising it for a question. We're really not answering tonight. We're just taking
Good.
input. So I'm going to flag that because it didn't seem to be here right now. Okay. This is a public hearing tonight, so we've had an opportunity as the board to ask questions previously. So I'm going to open this to members of the public who are either here or who are online. I know we had Jane earlier, so if Jane is still there and wants to put up her hand, now would be a great time for Jane to come back. If there is somebody in the room who would like to make a comment while we're moving Jane over, I would welcome them.
I'm inviting Jane.
I'm not seeing any hands in the room.
Jane should be unmute herself and share her video if you'd like to.
Okay.
Hello?
Hi there, Jane.
Hi, can you hear
Okay.
me, see me?
We can hear you. So if you would just start with your name and your address, that would be lovely.
My name is Jane Volden, and I live at 133 Brookside Road in Needham.
Great. And let us know what your feedback is on the plan.
My question was on the plan, if there's anything in the plan that forces homeowners who currently use propane to switch over to electric.
Okay. We really aren't answering questions tonight, but I will tell you that there is nothing in this plan that compels you to take an action. Okay, just so that you know, there's nobody who will be coming to you and forcing a change based on any current laws or regulations.
Okay.
All right.
Thank you.
Great. Other comments or questions?
Ross Donald, sorry, has his hand raised.
All right,
All right, I'll invite Ross to speak.
thank you.
Ross should be able to unmute himself if you'd like to invite him to.
Ross, if you can please unmute and turn on your video, that would be great.
All right. I don't see the video. What's happening there? Mute. All right.
We can hear you.
All right. Well, I'm going to turn off the video. I don't seem to be making that working. All right.
Okay.
Well, all right. Thank you. Yeah, this is a great document. It's a lot of fun, I imagine, to work on such a comprehensive project, and congratulations. I want to make a couple of observations. I have a little bit of a roadmap here myself. I'm observing some words, some terms of art that have become kind of mimetic. One of them is solar energy. Too often, in too many instances, the roadmap appears to use the words solar energy to refer to photovoltaics. Solar energy, of course, stating the obvious, comes from the sun, whereas solar electricity is an application like many others. Another term of art is solar ready. That's been around for a long time. And we all know what it means to put the wires and the conduit and things in. But if the building is not solar ready now, or not ready for solar electricity, it may be ready for other forms of solar energy applications, such as hot water, space heat, solar cooling. Since we're a summer peaking utility, that's going to be pretty important. Other forms of passive solar energy, including daylighting, which is often the most pleasant kind of solar energy application to introduce. This is all to say that solar energy is not only solar electricity all the time in every instance and nothing else. The overriding intention, of course, the whole exercise is to displace the use of non-renewable energies. Another term is net zero. Just in terms of buildings, what is it, 40% of the energy is being used in building, a huge number of non-renewable oil and natural gas. It's great to see those kinds of charts, and those are exactly the kind where the impact, where the results are going to show up over time. The term net zero, obviously, well, not obviously, but what we want to do is push the consumption of imported non-renewable energy in our buildings down to zero. And the way we do that is measure it by energy intensity. The Emery Grover, if the energy intensity is 20, 25, or 30, it's not good enough. It should be more. It's an old building, so that would explain it. But our buildings should be have energy intensity that is starting, 8 and 10 and lower. When it doesn't get all the way down, if we can't push it down to zero, that's when the net part kicks in. And we hope that that's going to be renewable, and municipal aggregation and other programs will help make that happen. But there's no guarantee. The only guarantee is what we can control ourselves, which is our own buildings, and we need to get them down to zero. And that is all part of demand side management, which is where we can control things. We obviously can't control what the utilities are doing. Let's see. And finally, there's an interesting concept that was developed informally by a cataloger of solar energy named William Shercliffe, who in the 70s or 80s, 1970s, 1980s, the early days of the energy crisis, he developed an idea of solar real estate. You can imagine a lot, a quarter-acre lot, and you wanted to install the largest solar collector array on that space. It might run from the side lot to side lot, from the ground to as high as the zoning would allow. And that would be the maximum amount of solar real estate. That would be your potential. Now, a building might occupy that space, but the actual effectiveness of using that solar real estate is going to depend upon design and efficiency. So if we are only focused on solar electricity, the efficiency of a solar electric panel, photovoltaic panel, is around 15%. If you have a direct gain passive solar window, the allowance, the effectiveness of solar gain is 85%. So some other applications, and we don't want to write off solar electricity, it's very effective, and we need it. But we want to consider all the options, especially others that are thermal and especially solar cooling, I think. So those are my comments. Good luck.
Great. Thank you, Ross. Are there other comments?
Yes, it looks like Marvin has his hand raised. I'll invite Marvin to speak.
Okay.
Inviting him again.
Marvin, if you would like to come speak, please accept the invitation.
Looks like he joined. He just needs to unmute himself.
Hello, can you hear me?
Hello, Marvin. Yes, we can hear you. If you would please introduce yourself and your address.
Sorry for the delay. Marvin Berkowitz, 23 Wayne Road.
Great, thank you.
I just want to thank the committee for all the great work they've done to develop this roadmap. Just curious a bit on the thoughts regarding transportation and the incentives, encouragement for electric vehicles and charging stations. just a bit curious about what work what efforts at the local level can and should be done to increase the adoption of electric vehicles. I mean, given that incentives and, kind of the financial policy regarding electric vehicles are really done at the federal and state levels. So thank you.
Thank you. Thank you for that comment or question. There is a section related to that, so. And some budget items related to that this year. Are there any other questions, comments?
No further hands raised on Zoom.
We have somebody in the room. If you would like to come up to the table, we have you come up and speak into a microphone so that the vast listening audience can hear you and you are memorialized. Now I'm looking at you and not remembering your name, and I should remember it, but you are a new resident to town, so welcome. And you bravely came out to the CAPC meeting, so you are going to end up on somebody's short list for volunteers very, very soon.
Happy to.
Right.
I'm Cameron Dorham at 151 Woodbine Circle in Needham. I was really happy to see all the work that y'all have done, and I'm excited for you to be a part of Needham, Gabby, and all of the progress that we're making. But some of the observations that I made as we were, as I was looking through this was, as you had mentioned on the slides, that this is just a list of to-dos proposal. And it was mentioned on there also that there's a 5-year review period to where we'll be doing a report out, but maybe setting those expectations on there. This is a draft and this is our proposed to-do list. And in 5 years, we'll be setting these quantifiable goals and holding ourselves accountable to what it is that we're going to be doing, because it currently shows at a 10-year period, which is really hard to estimate at that point. And I saw a couple of definitions that were marked as if feasible around EVs and procurement. So I don't know if this is something that we can do with the plan, but identifying exactly where feasible means, especially around procurement. It's been a hot topic in corporate sustainability on our scope 3 emissions and making sure that we are holding our vendors accountable as well as ourselves. So we can only reduce so many emissions ourselves, but we also need to make sure that all of our other pipelines are also being held accountable. And those are my 2 comments, but thank you guys so much.
Great, thank you.
I think Mary Ann's right. We're going to be seeing.
You'll be hearing from us. Yeah. Other comments? And if there are not any, then I know that the next step will be the CAPC when they gather next week. Oh, Thursday, later this week. I know it's on the calendar. We'll be looking at all the comments that have come in so far and determining what recommendations are for making changes. I think we've worked to try to make it clear which items are currently teed up and in process. So I haven't looked back to see if all those are in the right place now, but that is the goal, to get them in the right place. And so that it will be clear to our citizens to know what in fact is already committed to, and be able to see what we're still going to be turning up year by year as we go through going forward. Okay, any comments from board members? All right, then we're ready to go back to CAPC. Thank you, guys. We appreciate your coming and appreciate your listening and getting us to the next stage.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Thank you.
All right, this is the next item on our agenda, which is asbestos and lead nuisance dust requirements for demolition projects. Tim McDonald is joining us tonight. We're glad that you were able to be here this evening. And this has been a question I know that Kevin raised first of all and wanted to be sure that the board understood. And so we look forward to what I will say for people in the audience or people who are listening to that is many of you have noticed houses coming down in your neighborhood. And the question has been what happens with the substances like asbestos, like lead in the case of houses coming down and the dust that comes up from that and how that process works. So Tim's going to walk us through that.
Sure. And so I guess when we think about demolitions, there's sort of three components. There's asbestos, mitigation and removal, there's lead paint, and there's pests. And so the process in Needham involves three departments. It involves the building department, which is the department that actually issues a demolition permit. It involves the public health division, specifically in the context of lead, asbestos, and pest, and it involves the fire department as well. There are state regulations, Mass Department of Environmental Protection regulations about asbestos mitigation and removal, which require notification, they require containment and mitigation work, and they also set licensing standards for people who are qualified to do that work. There is a Board of Health regulation that governs essentially nuisance dust. And then there is a select board policy from 2003 that requires a fire department detail at demolitions to essentially control dust and be available in case there's any sort of bad outcome from the demolition. So it's a collaborative process across those departments. One of the things we've benefited from quite a bit with the move to electronic permitting is the quickness sort of signing off rather than having interoffice mail between different departments. But it has been sort of a collaborative effort across those departments, and it's been, in my opinion, successful. There is, and I had included it in the packet, a draft rule that is being considered. It was the last sort of page after the brief presentation that the federal government is looking at tighter standards governing dust lead, which would be the case if
Something that you could put up on the screen. I don't know.
Sure.
This is,
it's actually after the 4 slides.
Yeah.
It's an EPA proposal. Oh, sorry. Okay. So the EPA has proposed a stronger standard related to dust lead. Right now, Tara and the team, environmental health team in the health department are talking to Building Commissioner Joe Prondak and his folks. But the federal regulation, if it is adopted or rule, would be adopted in the fall of 2024. So it's not something that's coming yet. And there was a proposed rule that was going to ban mentholated tobacco, and the administration going into an election year at the federal level postponed that. So I'm not sure if 2024 for this rule would be the case or not.
and just maybe it's useful to say to people, houses that still have lead paint in them are pre-1978 houses. So generally, so if somebody lives in a pre-1978 house that hasn't had windowsills and their woodwork all stripped down and redone, it could be that there are layers of lead paint in that.
It could be, and that's something you would want to get tested potentially. There is a process if you're going to have lead paint removed, and there are certified people who are certified as de-leaders that can lead that work. Certainly, I think people know that lead paint is particularly hazardous to developing
brains.
Yeah, so little
And
kids. So it's something certainly to consider. It is one of our requirements, in addition to the asbestos requirements, as part of the demolition, that there has to be a lead paint inspection. If there is any lead paint suspected, it has to be removed. And then if someone sort of skips that process, there are oversight and penalties. We haven't had any problems in the last 10 years with asbestos and lead. We've had 1 or 2 problems a few years ago with a developer who fabricated some pest control reports, but they were found out. There were some penalties imposed. But we've never had anyone fake an asbestos notification form or try to hire someone who wasn't a certified person for each step of the process.
And when we think about asbestos, what vintage houses would people typically see asbestos in these days?
Certainly, if you're talking about 50s, 40s and 50s and 60s, Often you'd be talking about tile, like laminate flooring in a kitchen potentially.
And
Always-
wrappings around pipes, right? Those are the two.
Yeah, the
biggies.
furnaces. Yep, those are the two primary places you would see them.
But you can also see it in caulking and in other locations.
Which is why if you're considering significant home renovations, it's a good idea to have a contractor who is a licensed professional do that assessment for you. Yeah. I know that we do get in the health department inquiries about dust. The reason that the select board in 2003 required a fire department detail to be there was to basically spray down the site at demolition to contain dust. Residents do get concerned about that, but that is one of the precautions that has been placed for, I guess, more than 2 decades now.
Yeah. Is this an area that you have active concerns where you worry about our process in some way?
So I think our process has improved. The speed of our process has improved when we went to electronic permitting, because the health department's in one building, fire department's in another, the building department's in another. So walking the paper around took a while before. This ensures that if there is sort of any objection, whether it's from Chief Conrad's fire inspectors, whether it's from the building commissioner, his team, or the environmental health team and health, everything sort of gets stopped and we have to resolve that issue before the demolition permit would proceed. If anyone does have a question or concern, any resident, they can call the health department and we will investigate each situation. We should have, for any demolition that's ongoing, we have a permit in place and we have all of the forms maintained in our electronic system. So all of the documentation of the asbestos notification, the asbestos mitigation, lead paint work, pest control inspection reports, we have all of those on file. And we can follow up with the developer or the builder who's doing the demolition work.
Great, thank you. Questions from board members? Kevin, do you want to go first?
Sure. So can you just walk me through? So the paperwork goes through. Is the inspector go through the pre-1978 home and check for lead?
Yes.
And asbestos?
And asbestos.
Okay.
It's often 2 different people. Sometimes it's someone who does both.
Okay, and they sign off finding none or sign off saying there is some?
So if they sign off finding none, there's forms to fill out, but then that is a much smoother and simpler process.
Okay.
If they find some, there's a specific mitigation process that has to happen.
Okay.
And there has to be notification to the state and to locals.
Okay.
And until we get a form submitted by a professional who's licensed saying all of this has been mitigated, then it can't proceed. So we have to get that step before we will issue a demolition permit in Needham.
All right, and then they have to mitigate by either removing it carefully.
Yes.
Okay, how often does that happen?
There's been and the building commissioner would know this better than me, but there's been a significant turnover in the building stock in the town.
Yeah.
There aren't a ton of, 1940s, 1950s era homes that haven't been renovated.
Okay.
Substantially.
Yeah, I mean, the best way to contain lead paint is just paint over it.
That is.
Until you demolish it. So that's my concern is that, and same with asbestos, as long as it's not moved and it's covered, you should be fine. But I just wanted in demolition, if a dust warning is sufficient, if spraying down is sufficient.
So I think so we don't love the idea of those particles being airborne. There isn't a ton, absent prohibiting that from happening, there isn't a ton that can be done besides the mitigation steps we talked about and then the spraying down to basically try to keep the particles out of the air on the dust pile that's then going to be packaged up and carted off.
Yeah, that's not as comforting as you might think.
I don't know if it sounds comforting when I'm saying it out loud either. I think there are steps that are in place. I don't know realistically, and we did some research in preparation for this, my staff and I, if there's any place else in Massachusetts that has a different or better plan.
Okay.
We can do more research in that regard.
Yeah, because I'm thinking like asbestos fibers are microscopic, feather light, stay in the air forever.
Yep.
If they're soaked, they'll just sit there till they dry and then blow onto the air. And we don't know into 10 to 40 years whether it affected anyone.
Sure.
And then sometimes people are saying, I've heard from neighbors say there was no one there spraying. there's no one. I've seen contractors spraying. I've seen firefighter, a truck there. Sometimes I see nothing. So it's, some people have said it seems like what is happening.
So the select board has a policy, and it is coordinated through the fire department. So there is supposed to be a detail whenever there is demolition.
Okay.
If a resident or a concerned neighbor has questions, they could call the building department, they could call the health department or fire.
Okay.
Because the policy is that there will be a unit there.
Okay.
I can't speak for the chief. There might be an occasion where there's multiple emergencies in town and all the units are pulled away, but that would be a very unusual exception.
Okay.
And in that case, the developer is supposed to stop demolition work until the detail unit is on site.
Okay. All right. And then the dust lead standards are coming out in the fall. Do those mostly apply to daycares?
They would apply to daycares. It does apply in some other settings. I think the question for us really is it real? It would be a significant step forward in terms of much stricter controls.
Okay. Would that translate to residential demolition?
My understanding is it would eventually, yes.
Okay.
And how exactly that gets applied and whether that's the state Department of Environmental Protection adopting essentially the EPA rule directly, or whether they adopt a slightly stricter standard. Massachusetts is one of the few states that takes EPA regulations and sometimes does stricter standards.
Okay. Okay. And then there's EPA has I have it down, NASHAP, the National Emission Standards for Hazardous Air Pollutants.
Yes.
That does refer to demolition, but mostly for municipalities and land banks, not
for individual. Yeah.
Right. So would that ever be something the town would look at? Because EPA says
that's an interesting idea.
It's, it's a valuable standard.
Yep.
It should be followed.
So I can definitely look into that. I will say that a lot of the work we're talking about is sort of in the pre-action stage. And then there is, at least from our municipal perspective right now, comparatively little we can do in terms of like testing or making sure. So it's all like steps we do to try to take all the material out of the building before the demolition occurs.
Right.
Because from our ability to control things after that gets much more limited.
Right. And then do they have to dump it in a special facilities where it's
special
Hampshire, right? Yeah.
Not
New Hampshire, the state. There is actually a place.
There is.
I don't think about poorly in New Hampshire.
There are specific designated in the same way that contaminated soil has to be disposed of in licensed locations. Yes.
Okay. And thank you for putting this together.
Sure.
I know it was a lot of work.
Yeah, that's fine. We're happy to. And I guess the overriding message I would say is if residents are concerned, they could call any of those three departments and we will look into it.
Okay.
And we will go on site and investigate. And if there's demolition activity that's occurring without a fire department detail, if someone was proceeding with demolition and didn't have a permit, that would be a really big problem. I'm pretty sure the building commissioner wouldn't let that person build in town again. But
okay,
if people have questions, they should give us a call.
Okay. Do contractors use builders? Do they contract this out? Are there experts who go like, is it Lucia or?
Yeah, they contract out often.
Okay.
Which is some comfort,
Right.
Because it's not like this is our sort of internal staff member who does this stuff. It is often experts that, yeah, if they are caught doing that, they won't get any other business.
Okay. Thank you very much.
Kathy. I just have one question. You mentioned that if lead or asbestos is found, that it has to be mitigated prior to the demolition.
Yes.
Without getting too technical that I won't understand, what happens with the mitigation, and can you give us a sense of roughly how much of the offending substance is removed?
I don't know if I can give you this removes 99.9%. I can't give you a percentage like that. I don't know if there is one, so I will, but I don't know it off the top of my head. Certainly, I will look it up. So it would be essentially site containment. So they would, for lack of a better word, seal off rooms and portions of the house where they believe there's asbestos-contained material. What they will often do is, and it's sort of the cost-benefit analysis is something the developer has to do, is do you take this and send it to the lab to figure out if it has asbestos-containing material, or is it cheaper and quicker to just assume it is and take it all out? And depending on the size of the job and their deadlines and whatever, they make that determination. If they're treating it like it has asbestos, then they have to follow through on all of the steps. If it is lab confirmed that it is asbestos, they have to follow through on all of the steps. So from our perspective, it doesn't matter as much if they decide to, we're going to assume this has asbestos, but we're not positive. We have to treat it that way anyway.
So just so I understand, the mitigation is essentially trying to take it out of the house
Largely, yes.
prior to it being demolished.
Yes.
Yeah, okay.
To dispose of in a special location. Yes.
Yeah, so you would, asbestos containing materials, especially if you're talking about laminates or pipe covering insulation, wouldn't be sort of just sitting out in a 40-yard dumpster outside of a house. That would be treated separately and differently, packaged in a different way and taken to a different disposal location.
Heidi.
Hi, Tim. Thanks for the presentation. My question is about de-letting. A lot of people who maybe rent properties may have found that they have had to de-let in the past if there are children going to be living in the home, et cetera. So I'm wondering if changing the standards for lead in the home might cause some folks who have already de-leaded to have to de-lead, or if if the change in standards might influence.
It's a good question, and I don't know if anyone knows the answer to that yet, but it is something we should absolutely research, because if it does happen, we would need to do a lot of education. But I will try to look into that.
Because while Kevin is, I think, correct that painting over lead is a choice you can make in some cases. If there are children in the home, that's not usually sufficient.
Right.
And so we want to just make sure that we understand what the impact would be to homeowners.
Yes, oftentimes, this is where the challenging housing market and people have to waive inspections in order to have a qualifying bid gets to be really complicated.
Yeah. Thank you.
Okay. All right.
Thank
Great.
you.
Thank you, Tim.
Thank you very much.
Appreciate it. That brings us to the next item on our agenda, which is the town manager's report. And you have a number of things to lead us through, Kate.
Policy day. So, Cass, did you want to come up with this?
Thank you.
We've been meeting to talk about the policies in place at, for the RTS in terms of the pay-as-you-throw bags. The policy was old, and it had really outdated rules with respect to trying to distribute bags to people who are low financial needs. So that's a piece of the policy that we'd like to update. And the other piece is that we were working to try to find some way that we might be able to help residents who are impacted by locally declared emergencies like flooding, so that there may be, for instance, if a homeowner was going to bring bulky waste from a garage that was ruined, that we could waive the board would allow me to waive the permit fees. And then really probably in extraordinary circumstances, we might be able to have staff pick some things up, carpet, probably not looking at couches and things, but maybe boxes and
items that can fit in bags, I think, is what we had discussed, just
Yeah.
because things get so waterlogged, they get heavy.
That's right. So and then we would not charge a fee for that service. So we're proposing that might be some small way that we can get ahead of what we expect to be our more floods in the future, and also to ensure that households that really need the bags, and we do hand some out, but it has been less frequent, and I don't think the program has been advertised as much as it might be. Did you want to add anything to that, Karis?
And I do want to start by saying thank you, Karis, for being here tonight. Another night of a storm where I'm sure the crews are already watching and have been out there trying to prep to be ready for this after they've just finished. Well, they're probably not even finished from the last one, frankly.
It's sort of overlapping. We've been lifting up curbs to get the catch basins open today. So
yeah,
and you have staff here all night.
Yep. Right. So, are there questions from board members related to this update in policy, which seems to me like it is necessary and maybe a little overdue? So a good thing to be looking at.
Just had one question, and I think that's just thinking about the storm that's happening now / tonight until tomorrow. I know it's discussion only, but I'm thinking, the 2 to 3 inches that we're supposed to get of rain and the wind and everything, if we were to kind of push this maybe not all the way forward, but just if something were to happen tonight and people need help tomorrow. I'm just thinking, I know that's really, really recent, but I feel like, is it something that we can do sooner than later with what we're expecting to get over the next few hours until tomorrow morning?
That's what the board wants to do, yeah.
Just want to bring that up.
We don't expect that that's likely to happen, but it's
Yeah, I know, I'm
more
just-
likely to be trees, electricity, but we don't know, right?
It depends on what the weather does and
And it always surprises us, right? So
Right.
you just be ready so we don't have to get ready.
So, and I think some of this evolved from our thinking of what became evident that we needed to do after August.
Yeah.
You know, of which we did a little bit, and so these are some additional things from there. So I don't think we would let a policy stand in the way of doing the right thing. Okay, that's I think what you're really asking.
Yes.
I think if we look at what happened during the event, there's sort of two different groups, right? There's people
Mhm.
who hired a third-party contractor to come in, clear out their basement. That's not really the group that we were discussing.
Correct.
I think there were instances when we talked with Matt Demery, the superintendent at the RTS, that, you know, somebody's like taking things out of the back of their car and it's logged, you know, waterlogged carpet. And Matt's like, well, you have to go over the bulky waste, and they're upset about it. And I think that's more what we're trying to address. It's like, you know, somebody who's in that point, they're the ones clearing out their own carpet, they're the ones managing their own materials, and it's just like, seems like an extra burden for them to go through that process. So I think that's maybe the group that you're looking at as far as who would be impacted by this policy. Yeah.
So, can I just ask, I know that, you've described a little bit about how a resident would become able to access these services, but in practical terms, their house is flooded, they've got a million things to do. How are they managing that part of it? Like, are they having an interview with someone on the phone, or what is happening?
No,
To
I think it
become-
would be
to
largely
become qualified.
conversations between when they come to the facility, talking with the staff there and having a conversation about what the materials are, how they're going to be disposed of if the town manager declares that type of event. I mean, to be frank, it's probably happening a little bit. At some point, you don't want to fight with someone who's had a really bad day. So I think it's happening, but there are probably those who are complying with our policies who may be advantaged if they didn't have to pay the bulky rate fee. So I think it would be a conversation with the scale house attendant or with the superintendent or assistant superintendent on site, more so than like a formal process that we would go through. So first, I think it would be the town manager enabling the facility to make that judgment call, and then the operators of the facility having those conversations with residents as they come in.
I just want to make sure it's the two they both involve the RTS, but they're two separate. So somebody needing bags because they're of low income, they meet with a social worker, and maybe an interview, maybe a phone, but we're really going to give the discretion to the RTS to somebody shows up the day after or the week after a big storm with a rug. And we've declared a local emergency, so it's going to be a big event. So
Okay.
the board has declared. Yeah.
Yeah, that's how I read. It's two-pronged. So,
Two-pronged.
yes, it works great. I think it's good to get the people who are digging out a hand.
So we'll bring it back for vote, but if something happens in the interim, I've heard your guidance, so.
Yes, that'd be great. Because just expect the
But
unexpected.
we're
I
hoping
just
that
think-
this is just an extended rainstorm.
So if the inches fall out evenly across a 12-hour period, we believe that our system can handle that, assuming that all the catch basins are open. That's actually more the challenge between the
Correct.
snow and ice and the catch basins. And then if we get high winds, it knocks more debris. I've never seen so many pine cones as I saw on December 18th. And that becomes challenging, particularly because it's an overnight storm. So residents aren't likely to be proactive through the night, clearing out their catch
Right.
basins. That's really the tricky part of that. So there could be some street flooding resulting from either clogged catch basins, although we've lifted out all the low-lying areas, but they could become clogged from debris. The big concern is there's a potential for a band to come in at 5 o'clock. Again, it's everything has to set up a certain way where we can see a half an inch in a half an hour period. Again, not something that our system couldn't potentially handle, but it just depends on that level of intensity in that small period of time. That's exactly what happened on December 18th. Our system was performing relatively well, and then a band came through and it dumped a lot of rain in a short period of time. Not as intense as what we saw in August, but intense enough that it caused some localized street flooding.
And I just think with the snow melting and the high temperature tomorrow being 55 tomorrow, I just think that's why I'm more concerned about, as you are. I'm more concerned why I'm bringing this up in the way that I'm just like, okay, so if all those things go perfectly, we should be okay. But I imagine they're not going to, as much as I'm cautiously optimistic.
I'll take snow any day.
Yes, but I mean snow with the wind on the
Yeah,
trees
yeah.
and all that stuff. All the
And
things.
so people, when they get up tomorrow and throughout the day tomorrow, should continue to check their catch basins.
So
So be
luck-
sure that they're clear.
Yeah, luckily this should resolve itself. Luckily or not, early morning, I think around 7 or 8 o'clock. So the bulk of it will happen before people wake up. But yes, coming.
But then it's melting after
Yeah.
that.
All right.
All right.
Wish it was
So
snow.
we'll see this particular policy back next time.
Madam Chair,
Again,
would it be okay with you to move the ARPA program up because Karis
Certainly.
is here for that as well? So the only change that we're proposing here is to move some funding, 280,000 from the sluice gate to starting the stormwater master plan for capacity early. So Karis, do you want to talk about that? Sure. So initially, the amount of funds that we requested for the sluice gate were sort of the worst case scenario possible options for managing that device. That is the control on Rosemary Pond between that and the brook to make sure that the water stays in the pond. That's what we would have used to drain it when we used to drain the pond for cleaning the pool and the old pool. That particular piece is over 100 years old and is starting to wear. And we want to make sure, for a whole host of making sure that our town is well managed from a stormwater perspective, that it functions correctly. We had initially thought that to do that, it may have required a cofferdam, which would have been a pretty extensive process where we would have had to block the water off from that area, go in and make the repair and then remove it. It turns out that there was a simpler approach that involves isolating the water coming in, and they can work inside of the dam. And so we will not require as much funds. We actually have a bid in hand and we're executing that bid as we speak. And we had talked about if there were excess funds in this and the conversations related to flooding and concerns that people have about the town's planning when it comes to stormwater management, that we would reallocate these funds towards starting a stormwater master plan. I think I've communicated to the board, and I know I have to a lot of the affected residents, that a process like that takes about a year in order to execute. So it's not an instantaneous resolution. So we thought starting it sooner rather than later would have some advantages. We also have it built into the capital plan, but I think we had determined that if we had sufficient funding through ARPA, we would use the capital funds to start taking probably design work for the implementation of the stormwater plan.
Questions? And I would just remind everybody that even though it says uncommitted in that last row, that it's not-
135,000 is the amount that's actually uncommitted. We don't have a bid in hand. We don't have an Contract encumbrance signed. yet and contract signed for the big ones. Probably the next time we come here, we will.
but we are getting close to getting it all encumbered, so. Questions? Anybody?
I love it.
Not a question,
Yeah.
just a appreciation. I know this is so important to all the people who have been affected, and that their concern was that this was going to get pushed off and not be a priority. And you've worked really hard to make sure that it remains a priority. And so, thank you.
Yeah. And just piggybacking off that, all the people that have been affected are the ones that have been affected yet. So I think they'll be super appreciative of the work that's gone into this and what we're trying to do here. So much appreciation, Kat.
Do you need a motion?
Yes.
All right, then Chair, I make motion, the select board vote to approve the revision of the ARPA proposed budget.
Second.
Any further discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? 5-0. Thank you, Karis.
Thanks.
Thank you for everything overnight. Okay.
Our next item is a policy that we've been working on with respect to parking fee waivers and displays on parking meters. And this is a early draft for your consideration. And I know we've had some conversation, and I think that there's some ideas here that maybe need to be rethought. So I want to say that I know that before I ask Miles to tell you what our proposal was, but I think there's some ideas for retooling it. So.
To Kate's point, yes, an early draft with some areas that we could edit. This draft policy has a genesis in a process that we currently do, but don't have a policy to govern. Parking meters, I think I called them in this draft policy, associated support infrastructure to account for any potential future devices that may or may not be used for helping paid street parking. Historically in the town, annually, we have done things like covered the meters as a municipal fee waiver around the holidays. Additionally, banks or other entities have sponsored buyouts where they pay for the potential earnings of the meter for that day. They place an ad on the meter and as an incentive, effectively, and kind of advertising. And in the past, I understand there had been some sort of declaration of parking meters to advocate for certain causes. So this policy, as drafted, would basically put into specific language how municipal fee waivers as well as commercial buyouts or individual buyouts would work, allowing for a fiscal impact statement from the deputy town manager, director of finance before doing so, and delegating the approval authority here to this board specifically. And for non-municipal entities, it would not permit effectively political entities to sponsor buyouts. It would also prohibit alteration or decoration of paid street parking infrastructure. So it would not permit decoration for advocating for certain causes, as that would open some sort of Pandora's box, which, understanding from conversation, could also be applicable to a buyout. And with that, I would.
I mean, I would add that we were thinking of the decorating of the meters, like we were thinking about the flag policy, that, you know, one is great and then the one behind it, maybe not so much. Actually, the chair brought up that could be true for the buyout. So I think we wanted to talk to you about it, hear your opinion, but maybe rethink that portion. I mean, maybe buyouts just they don't make sense if somebody whose speech is on the buyout, you have a hard time saying no to one and yes to another.
With the analogy being these being municipal property and a venue for government speech versus public speech.
So with that, I open it up for the board's comment, but as I read it, that was certainly something that struck me that I was concerned about, especially in light of some other things that happened in other locations over the holidays. And it just really heightened my sense of discomfort with where we could end up. Sadly.
Yeah, it's just really a shame, I think, that you have to
think that way.
worry about that and
Yeah.
and sort of protect the town from potential inappropriate speach in that way. However, now that you've brought it up, I think you're probably right. It is very similar to the flag policy. So
There was, I just want to say, there's one other thing that I welcome the board's feedback on. This policy as currently drafted had a statement in it that says
Standing
a
waiver.
standing waiver for paid street parking shall be placed annually from the Monday before Thanksgiving through the first Monday following New Year's Day observed. It was not clear to me that I would necessarily want to have a standing waiver for that. I may be willing to have a discussion and designate it to the town manager, but I don't know if in policy I would want to write a standing waiver. So I also offered that for people's comments. Kathy, I know you wanted to have your hand up
Yeah,
first.
on the first point, I mean, I think you have to be content neutral if you allow any speech, right? So it is exactly like the flag, but you have to be content neutral. So if we don't feel comfortable being content
Saying
neutral,
yes
then
to
it's
anything.
nothing. You know, or if like the flag, you know, it's the government speech, but I think that's a point well taken. I don't think there's any way around that.
Could I add on the holiday parking? We actually had a meeting today on the moving forward on a parking app that would allow people to pay through an app. And there was some conversation about you know, whether the purpose of the meters being to ensure that they're available for the businesses, really talking to the businesses in the downtown about the holiday parking and whether to try to get some, and if we do have an app, we might be able to get some really good data if we don't do it one year and we do it another year. So more conversation on that, but I do think, at least designating me to be able to make the decision if we've discussed it, or at least putting in there that we might do it, like something that, because sometimes it becomes the week after Thanksgiving and we've forgotten because there used to be the NBA that always came and asked, and they don't exist now. So we want it somewhere, but.
Thank you.
Yes, you may.
I wonder if there is a distinction between a buyout and like the flagpoles. I mean, we're not selling flagpoles that you put your flag on. So there's a distinction. If you're buying out meters, what are you buying? Are you adding a message?
Yes.
Or
That's
you're
why they
not,
buy
or
it
is it,
out.
okay, but you're putting it on the meters then, okay.
Well, could you just not allow a message? I mean, could you allow the business name but not a message? Isn't the provision of the bag and the business name obvious enough? That
Could be. It could be. I'd have to rethink all the worst case implications before I say yes.
Depending on the business name, it could be something that, or I don't know. I think just
Oh, I
thinking
mean, the
about
business
that.
name could be something horrible.
That's what I'm saying. I was like, that, but I think that's a possibility, but I think very,
Because it's a business or an organization or whatever, so.
Sure. Yeah, I guess I'm just
thinking of other things. No, I
thinking it
got you.
through. It doesn't necessarily have to have a sentiment attached to it, but it's true that the business name could be something manufactured just for that
People get
Yeah.
creative.
purpose.
I think it puts a ton in the business now of deciding who gets this.
Right.
Which we're not
Who's
trying to.
selling, it, yeah.
Well, the answer is we can't be in the business of
Right.
deciding who, so the
Correct.
answer is yes. And we have to be sure that we are comfortable with every yes.
Yeah. Can't be yes with stipulations, what you're saying.
Yeah.
Already got it.
Right, and I agree with that. So I'm inclined to say it is like the flag policy, but if we decided to move forward, we could limit the amount of decoration that could be placed on the post.
I feel like that would put us in a terrible position of.
Well, as long as it's the same for everyone, though.
Well, but then you'd have to really foresee every possible
Yeah.
wrinkle. And you'd have to have such a detailed policy. I don't know. And there's always would be a way to get around it.
I mean, I know Alzheimer's awareness decorated the meters.
Mhm.
And that's fine, but I appreciate that the next might be Moms for Liberty. And, that comes with a different agenda.
All right.
More to come. This one probably won't be back next meeting.
And is there also a sense of something that acknowledges when this period is that we might typically have seasonal parking, but that it could be governed by a process of a discussion and then delegated to the town manager? Is that the kind of language that we would want, or do people just prefer that it be a standing thing?
I think it makes sense to have a little discretion, just in case.
We'll think about that.
A thorough conversation.
Yes.
Wow, who knew? Who knew that parking meters would
We have
be a
11
thing?
months.
I, for one, am very excited by the thought of an app. I've only been on the board coming up on 10 years. It was my initial goal from that initial MMA meeting. By the time I leave, it might happen.
Yeah.
There we go.
It's an interesting wrinkle about if somebody buys out the meters, the app still costs. So it's another incentive not to buy them out. So I don't know. Interesting piece. Okay. Madam Chair, the next item is removal of the fire department from civil service. This will be similar to we did exactly this time last year. The town and the fire union and the board and town meeting agreed that to pursue removal of the fire department from civil service. Town meeting in May, the May 8th special town meeting in 2023 approved the contract with the fire union and also a home rule petition to the Commonwealth to see if we could get out through that process. That's not likely to happen. There are a number of reasons the legislature is not amenable to having cities and towns come out that way. Needham is in the position of having gone into civil service by the ballot. So under state law, we can go out of civil service by the ballot, as we did with police. And so we would ask that the board place a question on the ballot for the annual town election. It says 2023, I apologize. The 2024 annual town election to revoke the acceptance of Chapter 31. And attached is the fair and concise summary prepared by town council, which is under election law, how that ballot would read. It says 2023 there.
Any questions about that? Kevin?
I learned to read when I was in first grade, and I think the question is really unwieldy. And is another way we can, I mean, shall the acceptance by the town of Needham of Chapter 31 of the general laws with reference to the permanent members of the fire force of the town of Needham, which provided that said members shall be subject to provisions of Chapter 31 of the general laws of civil service and the rules established thereunder be revoked.
So town council, if it feels as you do, also felt that mirroring the acceptance in 1956 was important.
Okay.
We have weeks. I can talk to him again as to whether he can think of if we even rearrange some of the sentences. Because I agree with you. We want to make sure people know what they're doing.
Right. Yeah, I think voters would be very confused.
Okay.
I do think that though, that the summary that follows.
Summary is excellent.
Yeah.
Yes.
Especially the last two paragraphs.
Yes.
Make it, quite clear.
Yeah. So I'm happy to defer this and see if he's comfortable with some retooling. I think they're just, legally trying to keep it with the sort of old fashioned language of 1956. And
do we have time?
Okay.
Yeah.
Sorry.
Yes, you have until the end of February. So I was ahead here. So your next
Even
meeting
to
is
get
fine.
it on the ballot, there's.
Oh yeah, 35 days.
Okay.
I was just gonna say legally trying to keep it kind of reminiscent of that, because what was the reason why it needs to be so close to what that was?
I mean, I can ask him, but
Okay,
I feel
just 'cause
like
I
a
don't know.
revocation of a vote, I think he felt like it should be as close to the vote as possible.
Okay.
But if there's leeway there, and maybe
Yeah,
we
I
can
think
check
it's a
into
good
that.
conversation.
Shall we?
'Cause I
revoke-
don't disagree.
Right, shall we revoke the acceptance?
Start with
of-
revoke.
Yeah, give the action what we're doing.
I wondered, in the fair and concise summary, is it possible to also acknowledge somewhere in there that this is the same path that the town took when they voted to remove police?
It's the
From
town
civil
voted to remove
service?
the police department from civil service
Yeah.
at the April 11, 2023 election. The very last sentence before the vote.
Okay. I was gonna say, I've read this like 3 times.
I
I
know.
could swear, looking for this. Okay.
It did get a lot of votes too.
Okay.
I would just also say that I would be happy to vote to approve this with whatever simplification we could.
With the possible
manage.
amendment, or should we just wait until it's all?
I so appreciate that. I do feel that one of the board's roles is to ask to put a question on the ballot. I really think you should vote it, and we have plenty of time. So I appreciate that very much. I would prefer you vote.
And for members of the public, the answer is this is the same process that we did, and we are looking to do it again, and it comes with the affirmative vote of the fire union that they also would like to exit
Yes.
civil service. So we are trying to all work together as a team toward the same goal.
And
So
we
we'll
are
come
officially
back-
out of the police department.
And we are officially out with the police department, yes.
Okay, so that'll be back.
All right, the tree summit proposal. I think that may be people's favorite topic this spring.
Yes, the board voted to have a tree summit. We've been trying to put together some framework around that, and we would really appreciate any feedback that you have as to what you would think the outcomes and deliverables from that might be, so that we did pick a date so that we can get this moving, but also make sure people know why they might be coming, trying to get people to attend. That would be great. So the ones that we have identified would be for everybody to understand that there are different priorities held by stakeholders, assuming we believe there are, assuming that comes out at the summit. Identifying challenges that the conflicting or intersecting priorities might cause, and maybe charting a path towards a shared vision for future tree management, sustainment, and growth.
Any comments on this from members of the board? Kate, it occurred to me that one of the things that has come up that I don't think is in here, and you may correct me if I'm wrong. One of the challenges that we have right now is Concom has a series of standards for trees in wetland and buffer areas. And there's no such equivalent for other properties. And there was a question about whether there might be some equivalent thought about what that looks like and what that might look like on properties that don't happen to be wetlands, but people are taking down trees.
Yes, and Deb sent us those, and we were thinking about that and she sent them after this. So
Okay.
yeah, that's something, replicating them for other jurisdictional bodies. Yeah.
Any other thoughts that people have? Otherwise, I look forward to hearing from all the stakeholders on this one. People keep saying to me, why hasn't Needham already done a tree bylaw? And I keep saying it's actually way more complicated than people think. And I have yet to meet the town that's happy, in fact, with their bylaw. And even if we don't use the word happy, if we try to use the word satisfied with how their bylaw is working, everybody, it's got flaws. It just depends on the angle of the beholder for where the challenges are, is my opinion right now. That doesn't mean we shouldn't do something, even though we recognize that it's going to have pain in some angle.
So do we have a format for this summit, or is that still something where
We're still talking about it. I would very much welcome feedback.
Noted. Okay.
But we do get a lot of mail about trees.
We are getting a lot of mail about tree summits.
There's a lot of angst about trees and what's happening in town. I think this will be a great opportunity for people.
And the feedback is often conflicting.
Yeah.
That's right, because there are people who would like us to keep trees, and there are people who want no trees and no leaves anywhere on their property. And we have developers who try to leave trees and who get asked to please cut them down by the person who's purchasing the property. So all different kinds of things occur.
I do think it would be helpful to have the town articulate some of the rationale behind shade trees, for example, and how and why they're picking particular trees to plant in various areas.
We're expecting to have DPW make a proposal on, and then maybe some other stakeholders about things that the town is seeing. So, yeah.
Yeah, that'd be a good starting point in any case.
Eddie-O.
There we go. Yeah, Mike. All right. The next item, if there's nothing else on the tree summit, the next item is the bylaw and charter review committee.
Just wanted to note, Madam Chair, that we have scheduled it for 7 p.m. on Wednesday, February 7th.
Right, 7 p.m. on Wednesday, February 7th.
I believe
For the tree summit, members of the public, mark your calendars now for Must See TV. You're welcome to participate.
All right, Town Bylaw and Charter Review Working Group. This is another goal that the board discussed. The fact that there's no regular process to really read over the bylaw and the charter. We catch things when we do, we change certain things, but there's no regular process by which maybe old-fashioned language or arcane language is taken out. We saw a lot of that came up during the non-criminal disposition bylaw discussion that we had. So the proposal is, the board had indicated last summer that you'd like to see something on the town meeting warrant in May of '24. This likely would be something that's included in the charter, because if it's a charter review, it has to be in the charter. So we could talk about whether the bylaw portion is in the bylaw or the charter. And the thought is that the board appoint this working group that would meet twice, unless once is enough, to develop the recommendation for a town meeting. There's a lot of examples here in your packet, but a common mechanism by which communities do this is that they have the bylaws reviewed on years that end in 5 every 10 years, and then the charter maybe years that end in 0 every 10 years. So the hope would be the stakeholders that we've identified would help write the warrant article and make a recommendation to the board of what to put in the warrant. And the other likelihood is there would be in the charter a standing group of individuals who might be on those committees, so that that could just be self-executing. Did I miss anything, Marianne, on?
No, I think that's all true. And I think the goal is, right now, it seems that when we wish to propose a change to bylaw or charter, right, there's this big angst about, well, you can't change the bylaws or the charter. And the answer is, we need to sort of demystify it. There are reasonable and rational reasons for giving it a regular review. We don't need to change things just to change things. That's not the point of this. But it is just to go through with a fresh set of eyes. A frequency of every 10 years is a usual and customary period, and that's what we see in other towns that have already instituted this, for taking a look at these items.
And one of the things that would be helpful is once and for all deciding how we spell bylaw. Many people do not like the hyphen. I think that's the new way too. And Madam Chair, typically we bring you a charge and composition one meeting and vote the next, but we've run out of time to hit this town meeting warrant. So we are proposing that the board act on this charge and composition for this, essentially 2-3 month working group max at this meeting.
You want a motion?
I do want a motion. I can just tell people, I think we've spoken to all the different groups. We've not had a conversation back from the moderator, although I did speak with the moderator this summer and then have written to him a couple of times. I know that he's been busy, so. But yes, I would welcome a motion.
Madam Chair, I move that the board vote to approve the charge and composition of the town bylaw and charter review working group.
Second. Any further discussion?
I was going to say this first meeting needs to be done on time because it is 5:30, the same day as the tree summit.
Correct.
That's at 7.
Intentional.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah, back to backing. Yes. All right. If there's no further comments, all in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? 5-0.
Also, I note, I believe, Madam Chair, you and Kathy had indicated that you would be interested in serving on that.
Correct.
The Vice Chair so notes.
We want to maybe move the consent calendar as well.
Second.
That would be lovely. Any comments? All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? 5-0. All right. Annual town meeting warrant. As one does. Here we are.
Feels like we
Talk
just
about
had
opening the
something.
warrant.
Yes.
We did.
So we'll ask that the board open the warrant. The list of items that are here is preliminary. It could change by next week, let alone by the time you're scheduled to close the warrant on the 13th. So things are in flux, but the normal items and things that have been brought to our attention, including the bylaw and charter review, the items that the planning board is looking at with respect to the housing authority, the capital, typical items.
The quiet zone
Quiet zone and
item
capital.
is in
Yeah.
here.
Yeah.
If we're doing something on the Newman Theater, is that in here or is that something
It might be added.
additional?
So I will be recommending in my budget presentation to you on the 23rd that we do fund the design for the Newman. But that is not in your capital plan, so it's not here yet. So
Yeah.
once we present it, we actually are making a number of even from when the capital plan comes out at the end of December to the end of January, there's movement on budget estimate. So we have a couple of more items that we're recommending that get added. And that's typically how we do it, is we put in our annual budget request what we're proposing to put back in the capital. So yes, I thank everybody who's been involved, that we've found a way that to fund the design for the Newman, and that will require borrowing for the second year of the project, because it's about a $2 million project, soup to nuts. So.
And is that for a redo, or is that upgrades to code as?
The codes are already in. The redo is all the lighting to LED lighting, all of the sound equipment, bringing it up to the quality for the productions for the schools. It is their premier auditorium, and it's also used heavily by the community.
Yeah.
Community theater. So I know we've heard a lot from people, and I think we've now hit all of the constituencies in the capital plan. Oh.
Need a motion, Madam Chair?
We do, I believe, need a motion, right?
I
Yes.
move that the board vote to open the warrant for the 2024 annual town meeting.
Any further discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? 5-0.
Just one item to report is, you all probably have read that the governor implemented some 9C mid-year cuts. As far as we have determined, the right now, the one that we've identified that has surely been cut is the earmark for the town seal and branding, which we received half of, and we'll move forward with that. I am, our meeting, I think we're meeting next week, or the week after, one of them. I'm confident we're going to get a great product from this, and we'll figure out how far we can get with the money that we have. And we have a really good group, and I think we'll have to volunteer, rely even more on volunteer labor, but I think it's going to be good. So, okay, it's too bad, but I think we get started.
Yep.
And as I said, when Senator Roush called me today, I can appreciate that the governor needs to balance the budget. I can appreciate that this may be one of her less important items, and as long as she's kept the critical items funded, I'm all in favor. So we will survive, and we will make our best.
You're still critical to us, Kev. And we appreciate it.
It's still important, and we're glad to still have half of it, frankly. So,
Right.
yeah. Okay. All right. That moves us to a few items for board discussion. The first one here is just an update on the open meeting law complaint. You will all recall that we received a complaint on June 8th, 2023, filed by Margaret Abruzzi, and that asserted that our May 9th executive session was improperly held. So there was a series of back and forth related to that. Our last response was on August 14th, and finally on December 28th, we received a letter from the Office of Attorney General that notified the board that the board did not, they're finding that the board did not violate the open meeting law as alleged. So I just wanted to bring that conclusion to the public and let them know that that one has been resolved. Okay.
Madam Chair, I don't think this is a win. I think there's been a lot of, I think some people may think that there are a lot of open meeting violations, but I think this kind of proves it, that we take this seriously. We don't work around the open meeting law, we embrace it. And I think this is sort of proof of that. This is the third one, I believe, we've had recently.
We've had at least 3.
One is still open.
But in what period of time? Yeah.
One is still ongoing.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think it's gratifying.
At any rate. Okay. The next thing that we had is related to the Needham Housing Authority zoning. So the planning board is in the process at the request, as it's described here, of considering a change to our zoning bylaw to enable the redevelopment of Linden Chambers. And there's 2 schools of thought, it appears, going on.
There was some concern on the part of the planning board that they wanted to put in zoning that there should be some limitations on who could be the occupants of these redeveloped apartments, either in terms of age, limiting it to seniors, or to people who have disabilities. Or the housing authority had come and asked that there be no restrictions, in fact, in zoning. The question for this board is just to understand what our position is between those two things. I don't know if everybody has been following this fully closely. One of the challenges as we look within town, well, there's a few things, I guess. First of all, the housing authority does have strictly prescribed requirements in terms of what is low income and what are the various income levels, and people have to prove their eligibility for them. So that is always a given. We know that we have circumstances where families may live at seabeds or cooks, and they may have younger children, but then the children age out and have graduate from high school and headed out, and somebody's in an apartment that's for a family, but now it's a single person. It would be ideal for the housing authority if they could move them to a place that's appropriate for a single person, which some of these redeveloped apartments might be perfectly appropriate. But in fact, if they weren't seniors or weren't disabled, currently they're not able to do so. So I think the question is, are we willing to take the limitations out of zoning and to say to the housing authority that we expect them to do their job in terms of managing who's in their apartments and ensuring appropriate eligibility for those. I think there are also eligibility requirements and conceivably in some cases some lack of restrictions to some financing that is potentially available. So it could be that by putting restrictions in zoning that we limit some opportunities for financing, which may want you to be fully open again to anybody who is income eligible for these spaces. So on that basis, I would ask the board, are there other thoughts that you have, or would we consider asking the town manager to send a letter on our behalf to the planning board to not restrict the zoning? Marcus.
Yeah, just the question of me kind of understanding, if we were to take the restrictions out, then what is the due process? And then what is the kind of, what do they use to determine if we're having the type of, I guess, tenants that we're putting in then? So if we take all the restrictions out, is what's going to be the thing that determines how equitable this is for everybody across the board?
So then federal housing law determines and has restrictions or eligibility criteria that they must certify and gain documentation that they are complying with.
Okay.
Kathy.
Yeah, I would strongly support our sending a note indicating that we would like to remove these restrictions. I think the Healy administration has been very clear that in terms of their housing policy, which is a really top priority for them, that they want that low-income housing to be as inclusive as possible, which means welcoming families. I think if we keep the restrictions, we would be at great risk of not getting our state and federal money, which is what we need to redo that project. And so I think we should strongly consider removing those restrictions. We want to be open to anyone, and historically those restrictions have been in place to keep families out. I think for people who are worried about burden on the schools, the Wyndham Chambers project is overwhelmingly 1-bedrooms. There are, I think, 8 2-bedrooms that are envisioned. So it's really not going to be particularly attractive to families. But I think we would get a much better shot at getting our state and federal money if we remove the restrictions.
Well, and again, I would say we do have other areas of town with low income housing that are more suitable for families, and that we will figure out what redevelopment means in there over time too.
Yeah, I would just add that I think segregation by age is not beneficial for a community, and to have folks of different ages and abilities living with each other can really be beneficial. So I would also be in favor of sending the letter.
I think there were other questions, and again, there's a number of legal questions here. There's some questions about things that are in the deed. At some point, all of those will need to be resolved, and I'm hopeful when we get to that point that we'll be able to just ask Attorney Heap to, in fact, work with the town manager and do the cleanup of those items when we get there. But for the time being, if there is, I would welcome a motion, in fact, if we could do so, just to ask the town manager to draft a letter on our behalf and send it.
Madam Chair, I move that the board vote to authorize the town manager to submit a letter to the planning board in support of the Needham Housing Authority's request.
Second.
Any further discussion? All in favor? Aye. Any opposed? 5-0. So the chair of the planning board had asked that if it was in fact our sentiment, that we have a discussion and get a letter sent so that the planning board could be informed that that is what the select board believes. Great. The next item that we have is committee reports. I have a note about what committees we had, but I can't find that page anymore. So who do we have to report on committees? I think we have Home.
Yeah.
I don't know if we have another one. We always have Home.
Home meets every 10 minutes. In fact, we've had several meetings of the Home Committee in various forms to work towards our next public forum. We've refined the choices that we will be presenting to the public at this forum, which is going to be January 18th at 7 p.m. in Powers Hall. And also we've been working on developing the format at the meeting, listening to suggestions from the public and feedback from our last meeting. So there will be a presentation. Again, this is January 18th at 7 p.m. in Powers Hall. There will be a fabulous presentation from our consultants with a number of different representations of configurations that we've made in map format with a survey embedded in the presentation so that people online, this is a hybrid meeting, I should say, so we'll be in Powers Hall, but you are welcome to attend online. And there will be a survey that can be taken both in the room and online and following the meeting. So if you are unable to join us on January 18th, at 7 p.m. In Powers Hall, or online, then you could access both the presentation and the survey for 6 days, starting on January 18th, in order to send in your feedback. We'll also be taking public comment in our regular format, which is to say that it's not going to be a discussion, it's going to be folks coming up and sharing their thoughts and feelings about the MBTA Community Act in general, and we're hoping for some specific feedback on the presentation that we have. But I want to make it clear that the presentation is, we feel, really important for our commentators to watch. So we're hoping that people will come and watch the presentation, and then our public comment portion of the meeting will start around 8 o'clock. So that's what's upcoming on January 18th at 7 p.m. in Powers Hall and online. In addition to the fabulous Home Committee meetings, all of them, I just wanted to note that on Sunday morning, very, very early, myself and Kathy and Miles were fortunate to be invited along on a snowplow with various members of the DPW, and it was fascinating. And as much as I wanted to moan and complain about the early hour, the guys who were driving us around had been driving around since 10 p.m. the previous evening and basically just got off the job like now. So I just wanted to say that the work that they do is very impressive, much more complicated than I think I recognized before going out with them, and I just wanted to say very much appreciated. So.
I'm so glad you asked. It's January 18th at 7 PM in Powers Hall and online.
Thank you very much.
I just wanted to second what Heidi said about the ride along with the snowplows. We're just very fortunate here in Needham, and that's one reason why the schools are open so much more frequently in storms than in other towns. But I also wanted to mention that I had office hours last week, and it was a full house. I had 6 people. We covered issues from all over the board, from international issues to arts issues to zoning issues. And, you know, it's great for people to come in and I, as a select board member, I learned so much when people come into office hours. So just want to encourage that to continue.
Well, if I can just pop in yet again, then I have office hours coming up here, I think in this chamber at 6 PM on January 30th. So if you missed Kathy's, you can come to mine. January 30th, 6 PM here, be there at B Square.
5 PM, February 12th. So choose your moment wisely, right? All right. Any other committees? CAPC is coming up this week, so that one will be coming up next.
Right.
We hope other people got a break over the holidays, a little bit at least. And if there is nothing else, then I would welcome a motion to move into an executive session for exception 3 to discuss strategy with respect to collective bargaining with the ITWA, NIPIA, Police Union, and Police Superior Officers Association, where an open meeting may have a detrimental effect on the bargaining position of the public body, and the chair so declares, and she does, not to return to public session at the conclusion.
So
And a second? Kathy? We need individual. Kevin?
Aye.
Heidi? Aye. Marcus?
Yes.
And the chair says yes. We are going into executive session. Thank you.